we are so pleased and honored to have you with us and can't wait to hear what you have to say. So please join me in welcoming John.
Thank you very much. So when I heard the theme of the event, I immediately went to sacred sites. Normally I don't do this topic, but to fit with the theme and to open the week, I went to these and built this PowerPoint for you. Of course, I'm going to start with Egypt, probably one of the greatest sacred sites on the planet. I've been there approaching 40 some times, and I was just there in January and just returned. So we'll look at some of the greatness. One thing I think is important for you to be aware of is that Pharaonic Egypt really ended in 525 BC, and not too many people are aware of that. You see, the Persians invaded, and that changed things. And then in 332 BC, Alexander the Great invaded. Now, the Greeks did adopt Egyptian mythology and mysticism and practices. However, by then 200 years had passed since the Persians invaded, so it wasn't as pure, and only a few of the priests and priestesses really knew the depth and the true meaning of things. And Alexander went and carved his own stuff there, that he was now God incarnate, and carved it right on top of walls that were already done. Then the Romans came in 30 BC, and all they wanted was resources. They didn't give a hoot about religion. And then, of course, in 641, the Muslims invaded, and they've owned it ever since. So Egypt is a very different place than the one your soul might remember from a past life, or you might think it is. But we're going to take a journey to the core of it. Of course, the most famous area or sites are the Giza Plateau. But I want to take you here. This is across from Luxor, across the Nile River. This is the land of the dead. It is where the valley of the kings, queens, and artisans are buried. This is where the painted walls in those tombs teach you the great metaphysical vision and understanding. Here's Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh. There were at least 5 of them we know of that were true pharaohs that were female. In the earliest period of Egypt, male and female were equal. No distortion of male dominance occurred until much later. So Hatshepsut, no matter what the tour guide will tell you, trust me, the truth about this, and Edgar gave readings about her, Edgar Cayce. Now my British friends call her hot chicken soup. And this is her Mortuary Temple, which is awesome, just amazing. These are real people like you and me, and in fact, many of you in this room, your souls incarnated during this period. It was a long period. You could have incarnated multiple times. You had initiations there that are like embers still in your psyche, and if you fan them today, they will flare up. It was said that the Egyptian artists were so good that they could actually capture the spirit of the person in their statue. And as you can see, this is little Tut up here. This is wood, and look how alive Tut looks. And of course, that's basalt stone over there, and look at the life they can put into that. Here are the girls getting ready for a ceremony, and notice she's adjusting her girlfriend's costume. They are very much people like you and me. She's putting on her lipstick. They've been braiding hair for a long time, many thousands of years. And here is the Valley of the Kings. That's Tut's right here. This is Tut's tomb. But you see the entrance to all the other tombs there. Actually, I'm going to take you to an artisan's tomb. This is Senedjem's tomb. It is no bigger than this stage right here. In fact, the stage is almost the exact size. So this guy would work all day in Pharaoh's tomb, come home, get a little dinner, go into his garage and build this. But what he painted on his walls is the most profound material. And I want you to focus with me on one thing that Sened Jim did. This is an amazing teaching of the location of heaven that fits so well with Jesus saying the kingdom of God is within you. And here he is showing you features of your own self where it is. And then he's showing you the scent of heaven. If your soul did a long journey away from heaven and lost its way back, your jackals, your dogs, could pick up the scent of the trail and lead you back. They painted these jackals blue, and there are no blue jackals in the world, so an initiate would look at this and go, this must be symbolic. There are no blue, and blue is the symbol of spirit. So they know they've got spiritual jackals picking up a spiritual trail, and what is the scent of the trail back? The open lotus. You see the lotuses? They are inhaling the scent of lotus. When you open your lotuses, you pick up the scent of the trail that leads you back into the heavenly consciousness. Where is that consciousness? It's between your two eyes. See the white light? And then around it is a blue circle and a blue shaft tied together called the Shem. That is infinity and temporality, the timeline and the infinite circle united. That is yin and yang, yin being the circle and yang being the shaft. And they are united. Once, if you're familiar with Carl Jung and depth psychology, if I want to have full consciousness, Jung says, John, you got to get in touch with your feminine, because your whole consciousness is yin and yang. You understand? So if I'm projecting yang, the full part of me is inside, and that's the yin. Anima, animus, he called it. Same with you. Ladies, you're projecting the yin. In order to have full consciousness, you must get in touch with your inner yang, your animus. Now, this has been going on in North America and many of the countries around the world. For the last 70 years, we've been getting in touch with our deeper self and the opposite gender dynamic. And it's been hell. So, but our women have been forcing us. And my late wife was determined that was going to be. Now, when you do touch and open to the white light, and I'll just show you how Edgar did his reading. He would lie down, put his hands over his third eye area, and he would see a white light. Once he saw the white light, he knew it was time to shift, and he would move his hands over his solar plexus, and he would go into deep breathing and REM, rapid eye movement. That means he's falling asleep on you. If you catch him when he starts to do that, and the conductor usually would, and say, you will have before you the inquiring mind of Mary Smith, the white light would move, and Edgar would move with it. And it would come to a great hall of records up in the heavens, and out would come the keeper of the records with Mary Smith's book of life. And the keeper would show him what he could tell her about and what he could not yet tell her. And as Edgar flipped the pages this way, he was looking into her future, and he could look way into the future. As he flipped the page this way, he could look into her past. He was quite psychic, even conscious, out of trance. One night they had skipped lunch, and this was during World War II. They were giving 11 readings a day. They were just doing all the mail. They had to do everything with typewriter. You know, they didn't have a word processor and all this. So they skipped lunch. They went down to the ocean front to get dinner. The waitress walks up to the table, and the little group sitting there, and Harmon Bro told me this story. They were starving. As she walks up, Edgar turns to her and goes, "Oh, don't marry him. He is a father figure. The man of your dreams comes this fall." And she puts the pad down and sits next to him. I thought so, but he's here now and he loves me. And Harmon goes, we'll never eat with this man. So as you can see, he could actually pick up on the future. His stenographer told me that if you went near him, he knew what you had been doing and what you were thinking. So she said some Monday mornings she would go around the back way to her office because it was none of his business. Once you turn that white light on, and then you can balance your yin and your yang, that brings the whole self because your soul has both. Then the water of life starts to flow. See the black wavy lines? The water of life starts to flow, and your cup that runneth over out of the 23rd Psalm, once that cup fills enough, it runs over and feeds the lotuses which bloom. Then you pick up the scent of heaven and you're on your way. Senedjim put this on the wall thousands of years ago for you and me to remember. It is a big tip, a big tip. And of course in Egypt it is the blue lotus. In India it's the white lotus. And as you can see, they grow in great numbers. Right next to Senedjim's is another artisan's tomb, and he shows the two realities. The infinite wavy reality of the higher mind. This is the symbol of Horus, which is a falcon that flies high above the earth, and they saw that as a higher view of reality, therefore the higher mind. This is the all-seeing eye, and it has a cone of incense burning to lift your consciousness. And this is the flail of your control over your lower urges, your lower mind. If you've ever tried to meditate and your lower mind runs off, the incense of the higher self is trying to help you bring it back. So you've got these two realities, the outer world and the infinite vast inner world. Now we're going to move into Ramses' tomb, Ramses VI, and right here on the wall is the entire story of our souls. And this is profound. As you look at this, I want you to see bird bodies with human heads. The Egyptians looked around for things in nature that represented metaphysical things. And so they always looked for physical things that symbolized metaphysical things. And they said, how are we going to draw their souls? And they said, it is them. So let's put their heads, human heads, but it's the part of them that flies above the physical body, the earthy reality. So we'll put their heads on birds' bodies and call it the Ba, B-A. So that's the symbol. So the souls come out of heaven down into the boat of the gods in the time of Aries. Do you see the ram's head on top of a dung beetle's body? The ram's head? Just somebody just say, yeah, I think I see it, yeah. That's A.R.E. In the beginning, the time of Aries, you entered the dung world. The Egyptians considered this to be a world of challenge, trial, testing, and proving yourself. And they knew dung was going to happen. Yeah. And they looked around and they noticed the dung beetles roll any dung toward the rising sun in the morning, and they plant a seed in it. And they thought, wait a minute, this is a great symbol. By high noon, that ball of dung with the seed is smoking hot, and the seed bursts forth with new life and resurrection. And they loved it and said, out of the dung of your life, you can resurrect your true self. And now today, depth psychologists love this too. That's why when you ever go to a psychologist, they want to get into the dung of your life. And you don't want to go there. I'm an enlightened being. I want to stay in the light. No. We need to see what might be holding you back, what you might be ignoring. So let's shine the light into the crap in you or your life. And you go, no, I don't want to look at that. But the Egyptians knew that's where. And if you look into the successful organizations of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know if you know it, but Bill Wilson and Edgar Cayce knew each other and communicated. And Edgar's 12 steps in personal spirituality is very similar to Bill's 12-step process. Anyway, by addressing their greatest weakness, they develop their greatest strength. And they do it with divine help. It's not just a strong ego or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It is a cooperative effort. Also, they do it with community. So there's we have study groups, Edgar Cayce study groups, where people work together. So do AA. The people help one another by bringing a fellowship together in similar experiences. Notice that there's a monkey on the bow coming down. We enter the monkey body. We have lifetimes looking backward. This is the lion of yesterday. This is the lion of tomorrow. Tomorrow we're enlightened in golden clothes rising out of here. Now I have a little more detail in a line drawing here for you. Here's the wall, and there's the line drawing so you can see it more clearly. Yesterday we came out of the heavens into the monkey body. Now that monkey is a baboon, and if you know baboons, they are extremely clever, and they are a symbol of the god Hermes or Thoth. So coming in with the Logos, with the God energy with us, we had lifetimes looking back, and now we have lifetimes looking forward. We rise out of here by human-headed cobras. Human-headed cobras. What energy is symbolized there? Nicodemus sneaks away one night, and he asks Jesus for the mysteries. And Jesus gives him 3 mysteries. One is the most famous and often quoted by ministers. You must be born again. Nicodemus, being a very earthy man, says, how can I climb back into my mother's womb? And I can just picture Jesus going, oh, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. No, Nicodemus, you don't crawl back into your mother's womb. That which is flesh, and you have birthed the flesh. Now within you, you must conceive in your heart and mind your spiritual self, and you must gestate it and give birth to it. He turns to his disciples later and says, this path is a lot like a woman pregnant. And now my hour has come upon me to deliver this. So you see, he's using that symbolism. The second thing Jesus says to Nicodemus is, no one ascends to heaven but he or she who first descended from heaven, even the Son of Man. You've already been there. Edgar Cayce was once asked, what will it be like when I become fully conscious of my spiritual self in the heavenly realms? And the smart aleck said, familiar. It's amazing. When you're in the depths of meditation and you have finally broken through, and I know how long that takes, you suddenly realize how natural it is, how normal it is, and familiar. That part of you never left. It's always there. You've just put a veil between you and that part and projected yourself out here. So familiar. But the third thing Jesus tells him is, as Moses raised the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be raised up, and the sons and daughters of man be raised up to eternal life. Now, Nicodemus was well educated. He would have immediately gone, Moses, the desert, the serpent, oh yes. He would have gone, Moses left Pharaoh, the ego, and all the wealth of this world. And Moses was loved by Pharaoh. He left all of that in search of who he really was and for a search for God. And he went out into the desert, and he came upon a deep well in the desert around which 7 virgins were standing. Give me a break. 7 virgins, and this guy must be telling us a little more. That is not a common event. The 7 maidens cannot water themselves or their flocks because all the other herdsmen or distractions keep pushing them away. Moses, one guy, drives all the herdsmen away, and he waters the 7 maidens. Ooh. Then they tell him a secret. We're the daughters of a high priest. Come to the tent of the high priest. The consciousness of the high priest in you, high priestess in you. Moses goes to the tent and marries the eldest daughter, the highest spiritual center in his being. You understand? He bonds, he mates and makes a vow. Then he sees God in a flaming bush. Flaming bush? I know we like to project it outside ourselves. That's the nature. But really, where did the Holy Spirit appear among the holy women and the disciples when Jesus breathed the Holy Spirit on them? Over the crown chakra and a tongue of fire. I believe Moses saw the fire, and the bush, the author is trying to cloak everything so only an initiate would understand what's being said. And Moses opened his crown chakra, the Holy Spirit came to him and God spoke to him. Interestingly, the Hopi Indians, which we'll see a little bit later, they also say that God spoke to them through the soft spot in their head, the fontanelle in their body, baby body. You still have that crown chakra of yours. And God says, Moses, raise the serpent off the desert floor. And Moses puts his staff down, it becomes this serpent, and he's nervous, but he reaches down and grabs the serpent, and it becomes the magic staff that does all the miracles before Pharaoh. God tells him to throw it down and do it again. So he throws the staff down, it becomes the serpent. He grabs it. He's teaching him, you've got to do this. If you want to come up on this mountain and meet me face to face, you have to raise the Kundalini life force, the vibrations of your body, in order to do it. Now, Nicodemus would have known, not only did Adam and Eve fall in the garden, the serpent fell also, cursed to crawl on the ground at much lower vibrations. Here's God teaching Moses, if you want to have full consciousness with me, you got to raise the serpent up. Raise the Kundalini life force up. Then you can come up. Remember, when he does it, goes up on the mountain, his face shone. And he comes down to his brother Aaron, who's always the politician. And Aaron says, Moses, you're freaking everybody out with the glowing face. Let's put a veil over your face, and then they'll listen to you without being all scared. He says, okay. After he goes up a few more times with God, he comes down, he says, Aaron, I'm getting used to being in God's presence. I don't glow anymore. Aaron, always the politician, says, well, don't take the veil off. If you're not glowing, they won't believe you're talking to God. Human nature. So look at this. Massive golden cobras with human heads. This is the life force raised to a high level of vibration so that your consciousness can expand. And I'll show you more in a minute. And this lifts you out of here. And you have lifetimes developing this. Do you see? Black over here is not evil, it's immature. It's not developed. Do you see? So you come in and you have lifetimes in which you're trying to understand how to get through the veil. The great mind of God is always with you, and this is the great spirit. They said, how can we show their spirit? If their soul is the Ba, human-headed bird, how can we show their spirit? And they said, let's put their hands in the position of adoration of the divinity and remove their heads. It's not the thinking, it's that feeling you have when you're in adoration. That's the spirit. And they call it the Ka, K-A. But when they draw big arms and hands, it's the great Ka, the great spirit, you see? And the mind of God is always with you throughout the whole journey. These are fantastic drawings that really bring it to us. Here's another wonderful drawing. Mother God's womb conceived us out of her crown chakra, her fontanelle. Her reality is upside down from ours, and the image she created us in, Genesis 1, God creates us in its image, is in her image, but it's an image that is not your ego outer personality self. It's your deeper soul self. But you're always seeking oneness with the consciousness, the collective consciousness, the universal consciousness, the mind of the creative forces. And you are in the dung world, and if you address all of your weaknesses, all of your temptations, you actually will build strength, and you will be able to bring new life and resurrect. You will have many lifetimes, but Goddess is always with you, helping you. Here's the watery infinity, just like the other artist drew. See the watery lines, watery infinity, but your boat is always heading toward God, consciousness. Here is Hermes or Thoth. This is in the most sacred temple in ancient Egypt, the Jerusalem or Mecca of ancient Egypt, Abydos. And on the wall is carved this fantastic symbol of two raised cobras with little hats. An Egyptian initiate would look at this and say, cobras don't wear little hats. This must be symbolic. You get it? He's putting the ankh of life into the nostrils of an incarnate human here. You see, red body is the blood body. In fact, the Hebrew word Adam means ruddy body, reddish because of the blood in the body. I blew this up so you could see the cobras. This cobra is wearing the hat of the ruler of Upper Egypt, or the higher self, your higher self. And he is on the staff of the lotus blossom, spontaneous enlightenment. This cobra is wearing the red curly hat, angular, of the lower self, the ruler of Lower Egypt, and he's on the papyrus. This is because your outer self applies itself in the search for God, the search for resurrection, by study, reading papyrus, teachings, learning, applying itself. The higher one, with these concepts lifting it, has a spontaneous illumination, and it's a smooth, round hat. So he's showing you two great powers. Raise your lower self and raise your higher self. This will put life into your breath and resurrect you. The reason Hermes has the ibis bird as its symbol is because the Egyptians looked around and they said, we need to show the power of living between the two worlds, the infinite and the finite, the heavenly and the earthly. The ibis bird lived on the shore between the deep water and the land, and so they said that's the symbol of the one who can live between the two worlds. And when you get to your full illumination, or have gotten there, you learn to live in this world and the spiritual world. You learn to have a consciousness expanded and a consciousness focused. If you just go for the expanded consciousness, you lose touch with this reality. And back in the 60s and 70s, we all knew this. We said, oh, we're really spacey. All these gurus came over from India, and we learned Kundalini. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, we wrote books, Kundalini Crisis, because we hadn't done it right. And you're going to see why here in a minute. Now, if you didn't get it from those two images, go over to this other tomb, and here you see drawn on the wall a serpent on his tippy tail blowing bubbles. Now, that is not normal. So, again, an initiate would look at this and say, what are they trying to tell me here? The circle is God consciousness. The bubble he's blowing is teaching you that if you raise your life force, your kundalini, eventually it will blow new levels of consciousness, God consciousness. You see the circle? So that's the teaching here. As you raise your vibes, you expand your consciousness. It goes way back to Sanskrit, India, Hinduism and all, but here it is carved on Egyptian walls over and over, and no one could look at this and not go, what the heck is going on? No serpent stands on his tippy tail. No serpent blows bubbles. You'd have to understand. And they try to cloak it because Edgar Cayce said using the same techniques, you can create a Frankenstein or a godling. It depends on the heart. Here are symbols from around the world showing you that even Judeo-Christian wisdom has the teaching of the raised serpent. After Moses has the people out in the desert, the people are suffering. And he goes to God and says, what am I going to do? And God tells him to put a raised serpent on a staff, a raised serpent. And everyone who looks upon that will be healed. Because your subconscious is looking through the same eyes your conscious mind. Your soul knows the meaning of this. Here's Moses, and they're offering their babies, they're healing. By seeing the idea of raising your vibes, you're running at too low a vibration. If you want to come up on this mountain and meet me face to face, you have to raise your vibes because I'm at a much higher vibe than the density of your physical egocentric self. You see? It's right there, but people miss it. Of course, in Hinduism, you see the raised cobra all the time. And this is Shiva, the destroyer. The thing is, when you study it, you learn he's the destroyer of illusions. And we love our illusions. We don't want to give that up. But you have to. You have to break through the illusion. If you're married, your spouse will help you break through the illusion. In fact, she will point the illusion out often. This is Pharaoh Seneferu, not Tut, Seneferu. He had a golden helmet too. And look at, if you don't get it, look at the cobra coming up his back and over like that. That is the pathway of the Kundalini life force. Yoga sometime back taught it straight up because I think they slightly, as they got away from the core truth, they slightly misread Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, because Patanjali actually shows 6 chakras and then full illumination. And so they read that as straight up, but Edgar says, no, if you go classical, the Kundalini comes up to the base of your brain, over to the center of your brain, opens the crown chakra, in comes the infinite divinity, and it flows to the great frontal lobe. I know you know the genome now is 98% of an animal's genome is the same as ours, but that 2% is real important. But the biggest difference between us and the higher apes, the huge frontal lobe of the brain. We have a huge frontal lobe. And they found out that the frontal lobe of the brain is where moral decisions are. A human being can override nature's powerful instincts and hormones. A human being, nature wants procreation to sustain the species. It's a powerful urge. But a human can override it with what we call taboo. The powerful urge to procreate, the human can use the frontal lobe to say, not with sister or mother. You see? This is a powerful natural instinct. You should screw anybody you can get close to. No. A human has a frontal lobe. And as the energy comes up, as the forces of instinct that the animals have comes to drive and all your hormones drop into your bloodstream, the human has the ability with the high moral code, no, not that way. This is powerful discovery, the frontal lobe. Read about all that they're finding about the great frontal lobe, and that's why the cobra is coming up to the great frontal lobe of the brain. I want to show you that the Aztecs, Toltecs, Mayans all know the same thing. They have a plume serpent, sometimes called a winged serpent. Of course, this is the Egyptian. Here you see coming out of blood sacrifice, because often you have to sacrifice things of your earthy ego self in order to raise your Kundalini life force. Do you see the Serpent Dragon here? Can you see it? And out of it comes your greater self, your better self, by raising it and by sacrificing. These are blood drops of your... Sometimes when we were 16 through 18, the Kundalini, we'd lose our heads over it. You know, remember when you went off to college and your Kundalini got away from you a few times? So they knew that. So they draw, hey, watch out. You can lose your head if you raise the vibes without higher purpose. And then over here is an Aztec drawing. Notice the wings or the plumes raising the Kundalini and the god showing the importance of this. Now we go to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras over in India, and I'll show you some of these sites in a minute. And we go to the symbol of healing, the caduceus of the medical profession, worn and displayed as a symbol of healing. It comes from the staff of Mercury in Rome, or the staff of Hermes in Egypt. And it is a symbol of everything Patanjali wrote about. You see, in the Yoga Sutras, he said, the human body is a wonderful physical device, but it is secretly arranged for metaphysical experiences if you learn how to use your body. And here you see him giving you this symbol and identifying the parts of your body that are metaphysical forces within you. The Sushumna of Patanjali is the cerebral spinal system of medical healing. My spine and my brain and the life force coming up. Ida and Pingala are the sympathetic and parasympathetic of my autonomic nervous system. Do you see this? And then they draw the 7 circles with the heart chakra. And then the wings are the mind. And they're giving you a terrific insight into the secret way to use your body temple for a soulful awakening and spiritual illumination and rejuvenation of the body. Then Edgar Cayce comes along and says, yes, that's the secret. But I want you to know that the chakras are associated with the endocrine glands and the hormones in your body. Hormones are powerful. And if you start learning to get into higher vibration, you change the hormones in your body. Women, don't worry if you've had a hysterectomy. These things have a way of compensating in a body, and also they're metaphysical vortexes of energy, so still your ovaries would still play a role in the root chakra. So this drawing is half female, half male. And on the male side, the testes are the root chakra and secrete the testosterone and stuff like that. And the ovaries are the female, and that's the root chakra. The cells of the Dr. Leydig, often called the Leiden Center, but they're named after the doctor, are the navel chakra. Your solar plexus chakra are the adrenal glands. And boy, if you know what adrenaline is, you know how powerful that is. And the pancreas, which we're having so much trouble with these days with diabetes, even in kids, young kids. This is that chakra. The heart chakra is not the pump, it's the thymus gland, and it became famous when AIDS was discovered because the thymus gland produces T cells that build your immune system. Very important to keep the thymus active. Thyroid chakra, the throat chakra is the thyroid gland, and don't worry if you're taking beta blockers to block adrenaline. Your body can compensate. The more you meditate, the more you do Kundalini meditation, the more you'll compensate. And you should go back and get another blood test because your doctor might be able to reduce your meds as he sees you changing. Same with thyroid meds that they give you. Now this brain has been turned sideways so that you can see the 2 higher endocrine glands in the brain. And the first one coming up the spinal shaft is in the center, and it's the pineal gland. And the next one is hanging, suspended underneath the great frontal lobe of your brain. And it is the pituitary, and the stem is the hypothalamus there. It's suspended because secretly chanting can massage the pituitary gland. In ancient temples, chanting was used not just to sing. This is singing. Om, I'm vibrating my vocal cords and projecting it to your eardrums. That's not chanting. Chanting is inner sounding. And if you've ever listened or studied with some of the great Eastern chanters, you learn to do that. So a chant would go more like this. And it'll get you high, especially if you've been practicing, because then your body knows what to do when, and it's really ahead of you. Oh, he's going to do that again. Drop the hormones. But do you see, I'm using sound to massage the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. And that bugger's going, whoa, what's he doing? Change the hormone messages to the body. The pituitary is the master gland. All the glands and cells respond. Do you see? And you do this. Buddhism is particularly into chanting, but so is Hinduism and other cultures. And Edgar gave several chants. I just did one of his chants right there. But you can also do rolling chants with Om, and it'll go something like this. And it is so good. I'm not kidding you. This is a technique that we've forgotten, and it is a fantastic technique. Engineers tell me that they can make a door with a lock on it that only your vocal cords can open. That's how unique your chant is, your vibration. Okay, let's keep moving. Oh, now I'm down underneath the temple of Hathor in Dendera, or Dendera. Dendera, it depends who you're talking with on how they pronounce it. And one of my colleagues is trying to help me take a photo, but I said, no, I've got 800 speed film with the greatest lens in the world. So he turned it off, and here's what I got. Edgar Cayce in his reading said that the Atlantean rejuvenation device is carved on the walls in a temple in Egypt. Many of us at A.R.E. back in the 60s and 70s believed this was the carving. So I want you to look at this carving. It's a bulb with a serpent filament and a lotus blossom cable. And I'm going to show you more about it in a minute, where this cable runs back to the Dejed, which is the symbol of Osiris's spinal column. Notice the vertebra and the energy. I got a better picture here. Here we go. This is called the Backbone of Osiris, or the Kundalini pathway. And of course, the two hands like this are the Ka, which is the spirit. So the spirit illuminates the bulb's Kundalini life force. And if you put your heads up against it, here's one who's so elevated he can touch it. These have to put a cup between their heads. Here's the priestess, and she's got God consciousness with raised Kundalini touching it. She may actually be contributing or moderating the wavelength or vibration. I would think you guys would really be into this, because that's kind of what you're doing here. And here's the lotus blossom with the cable running back here. So the secret is right carved on the walls. It's just amazing. Right next to it is the lightning boat. See the lightning and the lotus? And here's another serpent standing on his tippy tail. It doesn't happen. This must be symbolic of raising the life force, and that the boat of the gods brings it. And of course, there's the higher mind in Horus. If we jump over to the Book of the Dead, we see the actual title of the glyphs is the Book of Coming Forth by Light. But Budge, who translated it, had just been influenced by the Tibetan Book of the Dead, so he just named it the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's not carved on it. The inscription is the Book of Coming Forth by Light. Here again we see text and images teaching us the very things we've just looked at. Again, the lotus, the scent of your open lotuses, has the bird of paradise, the phoenix bird, resurrect out of your earthly self. You have the lion of yesterday and tomorrow. You have yin and yang, or anima and animus. This is incarnate, and this is soul, on top, victory over death. This is a tomb. So, it's all just there. Here you got a dung beetle rolling his dung into a cocoon. Now, an initiate would look at this and say, that never happens. This must be symbolic. Resurrection, the cocoon, transformation, if you do. We have people walking around with God consciousness. Nobody has that on their heads, so they're saying that's a state of mind, aware of the Spirit of God. Here's the weighing of the heart. I have all of this in that book back there if any of you want. It's full color, got them all in it. What's going on is what I told you. In the Eastern world, they teach that the bird of paradise has two wings. One wing is the right technique, the right training, but the other wing is the right heart, and you can't teach that. And they say the bird of paradise does not fly with one wing. You must have both. Edgar says the reason they cloaked their training or wrote it cryptically is because they were waiting to see if you had the right heart for the final stages. Because if you didn't, you got a lower job in the temple until you reincarnated with a better heart. So here, Ani's heart has been put on this scale and is being weighed against the feather of truth. If Ani's heart was heavy, this little creature would gobble it up and destroy it and eat it, and Ani would have to reincarnate and get a lighter heart. The Egyptians teach us that the entrance to heaven requires a light heart. You cannot have a bunch of regret, a bunch of self-judgment, a bunch of desires you haven't fulfilled yet. That'll cause you to come back. You see? Even Buddha says that. Desire keeps you in the wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth until you break free of that, you see? And you see it all here. Now we're going to jump quickly to the Toltecs. I can see I'm not going to get through all these ancient sites. So it's amazing the structures in the Mayan, Aztec, Toltec lands. This is Palenque. It's just awesome. I've loved it. Each of those temples has wonderful teachings carved on the walls. This one is amazing. It's in Oaxaca. It's called Monte Alban by the Spanish, but that means white mountain. But the ancient ones called it Sacred Hill. This is a mountain in which the top has been leveled. Of course, our evolutionists would say they were primitive loincloth people. We're the apex. But these guys leveled the top of a mountain and built this dynamic complex way up on the mountaintop. Fantastic stuff here. I can spend days on this because there are so many things to see in this complex. Of course, this is the famous complex of the Sun and Moon Temple called Teotihuacan. And I'm on the Moon Temple looking toward the Sun Temple, and that's the Avenue of the Dead. Just beyond the Sun Temple is the Jaguar Temple, all of this having to do with the life force and the two aspects of yourself, sun and moon, moon being personality, outer self, reflecting the light of your deeper soul self. Here we are in Uxmal over near Merida. This is where many of us in the Cayce work believe Edgar's story about the high priest of Atlantis named Iltar took himself and 10 others with 32 stone tablets of the ancient Atlantean story, and he hid them in Yucatan. This is the tip of Yucatan, Merida, if you've ever been there. And here's the magician's pyramid. And the legend is it was built in one night. And according to Cayce, Iltar could do that, who we believe the Mayans call Ixamna. His name, those are the same person. That's what we believe. It's a massive area. You can spend a day here. There's so many things to see. And here's the magician's pyramid from the side. I, however, want to, in the brief time I have, I want to show you the unbelievable imagery on a mural in this site in Guatemala, San Bartolo, El Mirador. It's called the Seer, or you could translate it the Looker, but we translate it the Seer. You're not going to believe the symbolism and the teachings in this. Here's what the wall looks like, and this wonderful artist, she's an archaeological artist, Heather Hurst, took this and created this for us to know what it all looked like. It's just amazing. So I always give credit to her because I think, God, she did this. I would hate to have to work with this one. So here it is. There are two murals. I'm just focusing on one because of time. There's the whole mural, and I've broken it down into sections. And when you look at these glyphs, they actually translate, the governor desires this to be made sacred and breathing. How would you like to be the artist with that assignment? Then here, this glyph means preserve the mystic order. Don't just give us literal. Earthly people, earthly terms. Keep the mystic involved. Over here, in these gourds that are blooming again, and we have the maize god or the corn god, through the supplication of the outer personality self and the deeper soul self, do you see? Begging God to help is actually out of his crown chakra bringing the resurrection, and they draw the symbol for emergence or birth. And there's normally what it looks like. See the baby, and that's a womb and coming out. Again, they pick up on the same thing Jesus said. This journey is a lot like a woman pregnant. In fact, the Hebrew word ish is man and isha is woman. But if you look at them purely in Hebrew, ish, shah, means man with womb. Womb man. That's what the woman is. The one with the womb. They're the same. Do you see? God cast a deep sleep in chapter 2, verse about 18, 19, 20. Cast a deep sleep over the androgynous Adam and pulls out what Hebrew says, the Kaaba, the life giver. And that's the man with the womb. Do you see? I could go on and on about all the mistranslations, but I'm not going to do that. And here you see the rebirth coming out with umbilical cords, and this is you in your dynamic, elevated, high blossom. Your kundalini is raised, and notice the serpent has a little head, a little face in his mouth. That's your spiritual self. It's finally awakened again. It goes on and on. It is a fantastic teaching of metaphysics and spirituality. Out of her crown chakra, of her forehead chakra, she has an owl, which is the symbol of wisdom. Out of her crown chakra, she has the same face that the serpent is holding, meaning she is birthing her spiritual self out of the womb of her mind and heart. It just goes on and on. It's a fantastic Mayan depiction. Here's another wonderful Mayan story about Shakwik. You see the dark lords of the underworld, or your subconscious, your desires, your underworld, overcame your divine self and killed them and suppressed them, so they were hanging on a special tree. These were called the maize god twins. One of the dark lords, which means one of your dark thoughts, said, just like Moses, I wonder if there's more to me than I'm aware of. And he gives birth to a female who is going to conquer the whole thing. A female would be your anima, your intuition. Anyway, this female sure is the one who's going to have victory. She says to her father, I am going to go to the place of feigned suffering of the underworld, Shibalba, and I am going to meet the face of the defeated maze god. And she goes, and the maze god asks her a few questions, and when she answers them the right way, he says, put your hand forward. And out of him comes the spittle of life from his head and falls into her hand, glowing. When she looks down, it absorbs into her body and she becomes pregnant. Do you remember Isis? Isis goes to the gods of heaven crying and says, we aren't going to abandon the souls that are trapped in humanity, are we? And Hermes says, Isis, have you been with them so long that you've forgotten your own power? And she, on the wall, you see her throw her head back and realize, oh yes, it's within me. And boom, she becomes pregnant. In the Revelation chapter 12, John is crying because of all the struggles he's having in his vision, and suddenly he sees a divine female in the heavens wrapped in the sun, 12 stars over her head, standing on the moon, and she's pregnant. And she's about to deliver John's resurrected spiritual self victory over all this struggle. But then he sees a big red dragon swooping around her, ready to swallow the baby as soon as it comes out. Archangel Michael comes up to him and says, see the dragon? That's the serpent in the garden that tricked you back then. Grown big and strong now. And he starts to cry and says, can't we have victory over this? And as soon as he does that, Michael and his legions ride out and drive the dragon away. She births the baby. John is thrilled. But Michael comes back and says to him, and nobody reads this passage, bugs me. Now the accuser is driven out of heaven. Who's the accuser? John. Self-judgment. I'm not worthy to birth this. I know myself. I'm nothing but an ego human. You have free will. As soon as you say that, you block all the powers in the universe. Self-judgment, you have got to stop that. You have got to stop judging yourself poorly. No matter what you've done, God can receive you and help you. It's in the story of Joshua is coming before God in the Old Testament, and Satan steps between him and God and says, how can you let him come into your presence? Look at the blood on his garments. Remember, Joshua conquered Jericho, killed a lot of people. Okay? How can you let him come into your presence with the blood all over? And God says, get out of the way, Satan. You always throw these doubts before them. If they seek me, I can cleanse their garments in a moment. If Joshua wants to come, let him come. You just have to be aware. You have to come with all your bloody garments. You come into God's presence and say, God, I am a mess, but I need your help. I want your help, and I don't care how screwed up I am. Look at AA. These people have destroyed themselves, their lives, their family, their friends, and yet they come to divinity. They come to the divine power and seek its help in the midst of all. That's what Archangel Michael was telling John. The accuser has to be driven out of your mind. You got to stop it because you have free will, and we're not going to overcome your free will. You set up the block and it's solid. She gets pregnant and she gives birth to the hero twins who overcome the lords of the underworld, the dark lords. And it's victory. She comes up to the earth and lives life there. Shakwik, a great symbol of your subconscious deeper self. Here we see the maze god in two forms. He is incarnate and he is in spirit. In spirit, they show it as feminine because that is your intuitive deeper self. The female symbolizes that. That's why the female is considered the more beautiful one, the more intuitive one. She is a symbol of the inner anima. And here's your projected outer self with the ego and the willpower to do something, to change, or to open itself to unite with its deeper self. You see all of this here. If we jump to Taoism, over in China, we come up with the womb of consciousness that you gestate in the womb through quiet meditation, and you perceive this truth. Here are the two books. I got them back there. The Mayan Toltec Aztec symbolism, the Egyptian one. They're back there if any of you want them. Now we're going to jump to Hinduism real quickly. We have a trinity there that's important to understand because Jesus said God was a trinity. And actually, Taoist Buddhists also have a trinity. But anyway, this is the most famous trinity of Hinduism. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Creator, preserver, actively involved with us. This would be the Logos or Jesus Christ. Here is Shiva, the destroyer, with the cobra. See the Kundalini life force? Here is a temple in India to Brahma. They're always very colorful, ridiculously colorful. Here is one to Vishnu, and this is considered the wealthiest Hindu temple in the world. And here is one of my favorites, Shiva's temple, dating to 600 AD. But this one is the big one. 1000 BC, the temple of Shakti, the feminine temple. And why is she there? Because she's intimately connected with Shiva. And now we bump into Taoism, Carl Jung. All of it comes together. Your true self is both masculine and feminine, animus and anima. Just like 5000 BC, why were they teaching this? Why were they using this symbol? Because they knew the truth is you are not one aspect of yourself. So in Genesis 1, God created us in its image. In Genesis, the first chapters of Genesis 2, God takes the dust of the earth, shapes us, and breathes the breath of life, and we become incarnate souls. In verse 18, 20 of chapter 2, he separates the feminine from the masculine. So you're only half of what. And Carl Jung saw this, so did others, many great others. And it's taught in the ancient legends. You need to unite the two parts of yourself. And this is not easy. It doesn't mean I become feminine. No, it means I get in touch with my femininity, my intuition, my deeper self. And a woman gets in touch with her masculinity, her stronger, determined, decision-making self, the carrier of the sword and the tiller of the soil type of energy in her. This is my favorite temple in China. I could spend days here. It is a Taoist temple in Shihan, China. This is called the Temple of the Eight Immortals, and the concepts and teachings are fantastic. This is also the temple of Lao Tzu and Lao Tzu too. My favorite is Lao Tzu. He wrote the book, the book contains his writings of Secret of the Golden Flower with Carl Jung and Richard Wilhelm. Fantastic ideas, of course. They burn incense so the smoke of your prayers goes up to heaven. And here are the key teachings. I know most of us have meditations like this, but ultimately your goal is a meditation. But I know, the mortgage is due tomorrow. I forgot about that. Oh, I don't like those pants. I got to change and buy some new. Blah! Will you shut up? Please let me center. And do you know what this drawing's called? The Center in the Midst of Conditions. It's a great name. And this is the womb of consciousness, gestating your true self, bringing it alive again, just like Jesus and others have taught. Here is the secret teaching of Lao Tzu. By inhaling, you raise the energy up your spinal column, unite with the heavenly forces through your crown and through your frontal lobe. And when they join with you, you exhale and bathe the chakras in the exhale. Then you stay in the empty breath for a moment, because that's deep silence. Then you draw it up again using the breath. Infinite joins with your breath. Fantastic, powerful teaching of how to raise the vibrations. Now we jump to Native Americans. I know I'm going fast, but I'm trying to get it all in. We go to the Native Americans who also have all of this spiritual stuff. It's unbelievable. This is the Serpent Mound in Ohio, and I've been there, and we've meditated over here in this grove. My whole group and I meditated over there. You notice the serpent. Now, can you see the serpent? There's the coil. You see it undulating? Okay, and there's its mouth with an egg in its mouth. It has 7 curves, has 7 chakras. Some believe it's eating the egg, others believe it's birthing the egg. And this is your body. Your powerful life force is coiled in your lower chakras, the first and second usually in most teachings. And as you raise it, and believe me, people who don't even know what we're talking about raise it. Nurses and doctors caring and loving for a mother loving a child. The energy has to come to the heart. So it automatically flows up and they don't even know how to meditate. Do you see what Don't judge too quickly. A lot of other things can happen in which they have illumination, which means the life force is up in the higher chakras. Here's the Hopi Mesa. I've been on the Mesa and learned their teachings there. Powerful stuff, except I'll share one thing with you. After learning about the metaphysical stuff, I mistakenly said, now I had my tour group with me, I mistakenly said, well, what are you Hopi really excited about? They said, they're building a Walmart at the base of our mesa. That really was a downer. I should have kept my mouth shut. But we all want blue jeans, so what the heck. I should have known there was a human element to the Hopi. Oops. Here's the medicine wheel in Alberta, Canada. All the Algonquin and all are all over the place. I got this picture. I know it's destroyed a little bit, but it's preserved enough for you to really see what we don't see anymore. These are the real original, and when they did blood tests, they found that their blood matched living people in Siberia, which gave credence to the thought of these people migrating into North America over the Bering Strait, or when the first one was over a frozen bridge called Beringia. But I just want to warn you, Trump might have been planning something with the Russians because they're thinking about building a tunnel. But right now it ain't going to happen because everybody's spooked with Putin. But wouldn't it be something? But I'll tell you, Russia's not the big deal. Korea and China would love this business. You see, commerce is the power of conversion. You want to convert people? Make them money. Then you got them, and you can start to teach them the spiritual things. Anyway, keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open for news that just like England and Europe built a tunnel, and now commerce is flowing, you may see, my son, my daughter, may see a different world when this tunnel is built, and we're flying back and forth with the people that we don't trust right now. Okay, here's a wonderful little Kiowa girl. Her name is Dashi. And here's more Native Americans. They don't have beards, you guys. They don't grow white men's beards. It's just in their genes. But as you can see, this is Victoria, Canada, and these are the Algonquins. The reason I'm showing you this is I want to show you that these people had spiritual concepts that we've lost touch with. They called God the great supernatural, and they actually taught that God created us through thought, the universal consciousness conceived of us. I mean, these are beautiful ideas. Here's the Pomo Indians of Northern California. Look at this quote. Most High God, ancestral father, came out of the sea and became a man. By the power of his words, the world came into being. Here's John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were created through this one. Yeah. Core wisdom was in every human in the earth if you get to the core of their fundamental teachings. Here we jump all the way down to the southern tip of South America in Terra del Fuego, and the Yamana Indians. Watch this. The old, eternal, unchanged one is the creator of the creator. You go to Hinduism, in Brahman, the source is Atman. Atman is the active creator. So the creator created the creator. And a little of the Atman is in each of us. It's really amazing. And now we jump up into the Haida Indians and the Sioux. The Haida actually say, quote, "The power of the shining heavens is the Great Spirit." And when you look up at night sky, they saw the power of that. Behind what they see is the power. That is the Great Spirit. The Great Holy, by the Sioux, can actually be translated the Holy Spirit in English. Now, the Great Milky Way is the river of souls. And this is fascinating because even the Bolivian natives see this. And here's what they teach. Heaven looks down on us and sees the top of our heads. We look up and see the tops of their heads. And it is maize, corn. And here's the top of a corn plant, and they say that looks like a star. Do you see how they're native, sitting underneath night skies, and yet in them is a spiritual longing, a spiritual intuition, and they start to see the spirituality. It's amazing. It's all there. Now, this tribe here in Western Canada are into totem poles, and they teach us that the Milky Way is the abode of their ancestors, and that there's a cosmic pole, a totem pole, that connects Earth with that. And that's why they do all these fantastic poles here. Well, you jump to Mayans and Aztecs. This is Aztec, that's Mayan. And sure enough, they show the tree of life as the pole connecting heaven and earth, and even the underworld. This is the underworld, and it'll bite you in the ass sometimes if you don't pay attention to what's motivating you. Edgar Cayce said, first thing you should do is set your ideals, because when you start to move the energy, you better have the right direction, or bite, and you make a fool of yourself. Here's the watery underworld. If you miss the idea, the student is told by three fingers, three worlds, three realities. I love the idea that the Aztecs think, let's give them a little tip on the test. And there's the heavens. There's the heavens. Notice that you do have to raise the serpent energy. See the serpent coming up the tree? Do you see that? You have to raise your vibes, and then your higher self is illuminated. Here you actually see the underworld is the roots. The outer world is the earthy place, and higher in the leaves of the trees and the higher parts of the trees reach into heaven. So these are always supported. We aren't going to have time to do this, but I'll give you the fundamental essence of it. In Turkey, and it's a wonderful place to tour. I don't know since the government changed, but back when I used to tour, the government was totally friendly, preserved all the Christian and Jewish sites for us, allowed us to tour them freely, never had any problems. The seven churches of Asia Minor begin the Revelation, and everybody's tried to interpret the Revelation, but Edgar Cayce blew everybody away with his interpretation because it was very psychological. He moved the seven churches inside your body. He moved all the activities described as not so much external as internal. He said all the earthquakes, all the dark forces, all the dragons, all the energies are dynamics within yourself that your angelic self tries to overcome, transform. And so he said, and I wrote it in this book here, when John sees one like unto the Son of Man with power and seven stars and the seven churches, he is actually giving you a secret about each of your chakras. The mental, the soulful, and the physical. And it's a meeting place of all three. So when the Spirit speaks to them, it actually, every time the Spirit appears to a church, it gives them their strength, their weakness, a symbol, and then a portion of the Lord's Prayer. Edgar actually said that Jesus was secretly teaching the holy women and the disciples key words in the Lord's Prayer that related to chakras. Wow, I couldn't believe. And now the Pope comes out and approves changing the Lord's Prayer. This is a prayer that's 2,000 years old, and they're changing it. They say it was poorly translated. Edgar said the same thing, and he retranslated the Lord's Prayer for us. Amazing. So anyway, your first chakra, your strength is patience. Your weakness is you left your first love, which was spirituality. You left that in seeking your own discovery. But Carl Jung would say, you had to do that. Edgar says you were supposed to come to know yourself, to be yourself, yet one with the whole. Therefore, Jung says you had to be yourself. Well, you had to discover yourself, and he calls it individuation. You psychologists know this. When you're raising your babies, or you yourself was a baby, you loved your parents, you thought you were one flesh with them when you were little. Then you grew a little bit, and you could go away from them, but you always ran back because they were the center. Then you became a teenager. And all you wanted was the keys to the car and no more advice from them. Individuation. You went out to discover yourself. And then about 29 or 26, depending on you, you moved back in with them and brought your laundry. Hey, Mom, Dad, I had it good here, man. Okay if I do my laundry, Mom? This is the journey of the soul. Exactly. You had to individuate. But in order to do that, you kind of left your first love. And now you long for it. You have a hole in your heart. And you don't know what it is. And no woman or man seems to be able to fill it. It's because you're part of the Great Spirit. And that spirit is your true mate. And once you touch that, you make a good husband or spouse or wife, whatever. You make a good human because you filled that hole. The white horse is the symbol of the four horsemen. It rides out to conquer all of your weaknesses. The Lord's Prayer is, give me my daily bread. Coming from the root chakra. Do you see? See? Energy, life force, daily bread. Okay, I'm just going to go quickly here. So these are the sites in Turkey. They're fantastic. Each one is a chakra. I've been to all of them. They are amazing. I do not know the situation with the new government. They say it's a little more dangerous. I don't know. It's in my book here, Edgar Cayce's amazing interpretation of the Revelation. So I left 7 minutes for questions. Do we have any? Yes, sir.
Thank you, John. That was incredible. Yeah. I'm curious if you have a view as to how old things like the Khafre Pyramid and the Great Sphinx actually are. There are obviously theories promoted by Graham Hancock and Robert Bobal that they're well in excess of...
And Robert Schoch.
And Robert Schoch,
right. Things are changing so fast. Unfortunately, in Turkey, we discovered Göbekli Tepe, and it turned the archaeological world on their heads because it could be 12,000 BC, and evolution says, no, they were primitive. We're the apex. And yet these guys were doing things so sophisticated with teachings that were so high, it doesn't fit. And so now everything's in turmoil. The trouble is, Göbekli is right on the border with Syria. You can't go visit it without taking your life in your hands. There were 2 bombings there, by the way. And the Turks shot down some jets. So and I don't even know if the Turks would let you go nowadays. I don't know that. So all the dating is in flux right now. And of course, Schoch, Dr. Robert Schoch from Boston University showed that tropical water rain runoff shaped the Sphinx pit. And therefore that's 9 to 11,000 BC. And that turned the place upside down. Now, there are still archaeologists arguing against it, and some of them are close friends with us. I'm still friends with Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner. So I think dates are in fluctuation. Any other question? All right, great. Let's take our break. My books are back on the table back there if you want any, or you can go on johnvanauken.com. You'll see them. Thank you very much for inviting me.